Let me ask you guys something real quick before we start off the video. What would your life look like if one income was enough? I'm not talking like you're working 2 jobs or a side hustle on top of your regular job or like 5 jobs. I'm saying you're not skipping vacations and you're not driving until your car falls apart. Just one job, enough to buy a house, support a family if you have one, enough to take a week off in the summer without it destroying your entire budget, right? So for millions of ordinary Americans, that was not a dream, you guys. For about 28 years, it was just another Tuesday. A factory worker in 1955 earned the equivalent of roughly $60K in today's dollars, with benefits, with a pension, with job security, and a median home cost, the equivalent of about 2 years of salary. Now, today, the median home costs about 5 to 6 times the median annual income. So let that sink in for a second, okay? The same job that bought a house in 1955 can barely cover rent today. So what happened, right? What the heck happened? Well, that's what this episode is about. I'm not trying to make anyone nostalgic for a past that wasn't perfect for everybody, because it definitely wasn't, and we are going to talk honestly about that too during this episode, and I'm going to do my best to not overstep, and if I do, tell me in the comment section, because I always take the feedback and I learn from it and I do better the next time. So that being said, I'm going to show you what was real, what was possible, and exactly when and how and where it kind of all changed, right? So let's actually talk about what created that prosperity, right? Because it didn't happen by accident, you guys. It didn't happen because Americans suddenly started working harder, the grind. It happened because of a specific documented policies that put money well in working people's pockets. So let's start at the top. Where do you think I'm starting? Take a guess. Okay, so let's start with the GI Bill, you guys. In 1944, Congress passed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, right? Now, most people know it as the GI Bill. It provided returning World War II veterans with college tuition, benefits, low-interest home loans, and job training. And roughly 8 million veterans used the education benefits. Nearly 4 million used the home loan benefits. Now, that created an entire generation, right, of college-educated homeowners who became the foundation of the American middle class. But here's the next piece. The union membership. So in 1954, roughly 35% of Americans belonged to a union, the ones in the workforce. And that is more than 1 in 3 workers. Now today that number is about, 10%. And mostly only in the public sector. But why does this all matter? What's the bigger picture here, right? Because unions negotiated wages directly with employers. Now when a third of the workforce, right, has a collective bargaining power, wages went up across the board. Even workers who weren't in unions benefited because companies had to compete for workers. We made them beg for us. We need to go back to that. Now, here are the actual numbers in today's dollars. So a unionized auto worker in 1955, for example, and this is the reason I'm using this example is because that was my father in that time period. So my father was an auto worker around 1955. And here in the equivalent, too, of roughly 55 to 65K annually, depending if there's any bonuses, etc., overtime, whatever. But he was not unionized back then, but he was an auto worker, and he was making that much because of the unions. Now, and he also had the same thing as the unions, full benefits, a defined pension at the time with job security protections. Now, that same job today pays comparable wages only at the most heavily unionized plants, right? So where my dad worked was not unionized, but he was being paid like one in the same time period because unions made corporations beg for us, regardless if we were part of the union or not. And my dad was able to negotiate in a pension he was able to cash out right away without penalty. It was a whole thing. My dad, I can go more into that later if you guys are interested, because my dad had a pretty dang good track record of being able to negotiate things into his payments. So, with that being said, most manufacturing jobs right now pay significantly less in real terms right now than they did 60 years ago. So housing also tells the same story. So let's get into housing, shall we? Now, in 1950, the median home price was about $7K. Now, that median household income back then was about $3,300, rough give or take. That means a home costs roughly 2 years' worth of income back then. What do you guys think the median home price is today? From what I researched and fact-checked, it is about $400K. 7K? $400K. But what is the median household income? Well, it's only roughly around $75K. So that means a new home now costs more than 5 years of income, 2 to 5. And it doesn't seem like a big jump when you say the number is 2, right? And then the number is 5. But really think about that, right? Right? Because, you know, if you're making about $3,300 a year and your house only cost you $7,000, but now it costs $400,000 and you're only getting steady, the math sucks. It sucks. You don't win. With that being said, the work did not get harder. The math just got worse, like I said. So these are not opinions that I'm giving you. These are like documented numbers that I was able to find from federal data. So anyone can look this up. And I always, what do I always say to you guys? I encourage you to do your own fact checking. If you see something that's off with anything I say, any information or any data I give, let me know. I will easily re-fact check and I'll be like, hey, you're right, here's my video response. I'll correct this real quick. Or, hey, this is why I use this data over the set that you found. I'm that type of person. I'm not going to argue with you back and forth in the comment section, but I try to give you guys data and information that you can easily fact check yourself, so I'm not confusing everybody, because my job here is to teach you guys so you learn something, so we can stop repeating the same damn mistakes, okay? That's why I'm here. So sit down, because we're not done. Because the boom was real, the prosperity was real, but it was built on specific foundations, strong unions, right? Government investment in working people through programs like the GI Bill I mentioned. A manufacturing economy that kept jobs and wages here in America. Those foundations didn't just disappear on their own. They were dismantled. But before we get there, we need to have an honest conversation. And this is the part where I'm hoping I'm not overstepping. And please tell me if I am. Because that boom was not available to everyone equally back then. And understanding who was left out tells you everything about who designed this system. Let's get into it. Okay, let's have this honest conversation because it needs to happen. Because the boom was real, but it was not real for everyone equally. And that is not my opinion, you guys. That is documented federal policy. And I'm about to explain it to you like you're 5. And the POC community, please tell me if I'm overstepping. Please, I'm trying to amplify what you guys have been screaming for decades. Okay, I'm trying. I am trying my best. Hopefully white people listen to a white person. That's what I'm hoping here. With that being said, the GI Bill. So we talked about how transformative it was, right? 8 million veterans using education benefits, 4 million using home loans, an entire middle class built on that GI Bill foundation. But here's what the history books left out of most classrooms, if not all of them. Black veterans were systematically denied those same benefits. And it wasn't because at first the law excluded them, because the law itself did not explicitly discriminate, but it's not their fault at all. It is actually the federal government's fault. So it's not black veterans' fault. It is the government's fault, because the administration of benefits was literally left to local offices. And where was most of that during that time? In the South. Yep. Yes. And those local offices denied black veterans loans. They denied them access to the colleges that received GI Bill funding, steered them away from the suburbs being built with federal money. Of the first 67,000 mortgages insured by the GI Bill in New York and New Jersey combined, only 100, out of 67,000, okay? 67000, okay? Only 100 went to non-white families. 100. That is absolutely despicable, disgusting, and horrific, and oh my God, am I mad at our history. I mean, I've been mad at our history this entire time, don't get me wrong, but that, if you don't know me, some of my first friends are in the POC community when I was growing up, so, like, I have a huge tie, and I'm a huge ally, okay? So this disgusts me. It honestly disgusts me, and if I could go back in time, I'd probably slap some sense into people. I'd probably get burned at the stake for it. I don't care. Because someone needs to be slapped upside the head with something for what happened here. With that being said, 100 out of 67,000. So that is not an accident, my friends. That is a documented, deliberate, systematic exclusion from the single biggest wealth building program in American history, right? And then we're going to talk about another subject that, well, Black voices, I've been hearing them for decades. Okay, I'm 31 years old. For the past 2 decades, I've heard my friends' families talk about this. I have been educated on what is considered redlining. So if you are not familiar with redlining, oh boy, am I going to fill you in. Because the federal government literally drew red lines on a map around neighborhoods where black families lived. Look it up. Fact check me. I'm not wrong. And it's disgusting. what they did, because they designated those areas as too risky too for federally backed loans. So you see what I'm saying here? They drew red lines around black families' neighborhoods and then designated those areas as too risky for federal backed loans from like the GI Bill. Yep. So that meant what? That black families could not get mortgages in those neighborhoods. But it gets worse. And this is where every white person needs to be mad at how other people were treated. And if you're not, just get off the planet because you don't belong here, go to Mars. That being said, they were literally also blocked from moving into the new suburbs being built outside those red lines on the map. So while white families were building equity and generational wealth through home ownership, black families were locked out of that same opportunity by federal policy, and that's despicable. The racial wealth gap we talk about today did not happen because of different work ethics or different values or your skin color. It was about skin color, but it was not about everyday working Americans' skin color versus skin color. It wasn't that fight like we were seeing today. It was literally created, though, by documented government policy. Our American government oppressed black communities. And we are not more pissed about this, and we need to be more pissed about this. Okay? We need more than just the George Floyd energy here on this, because this is not okay in any shape or form. I mean, granted, it's not okay what's happening right now in America to any of us. But that being said, us white folks are not the most oppressed right now. We are not, and we never have been. Okay? So get off your high horse that you think you're all white supremacy or like top tier better than every other race, because you're not. You're not. You're mixed mutt. That's what you are. If you are white, you are mixed mutt, in my opinion. So shut the hell up, sit the hell down, and listen to history, because y'all apparently need lessons, which is why I even started this series to begin with. Okay? And I'm going to get heated during this, because my friends I care about. And like I said, a lot of my friends are in the POC community. So this pisses me off. It really does. It's always been a heated subject for me with what the government has done to our amazing families just because they aren't white. And I won't stand for that shit going forward. I'm done. I've been done, but I'm definitely done now. Like, I'm not gonna be quiet and sit back down unless the POC community tells me to, because I am so sick of this. So sick of it. With that being said, let's move on. Not like move on to a different subject. We're going to stay on the same subject. I'm so sorry, you guys. Thank you for coming to my little TED Talk right in the middle of this episode. But it was created by documented government policy. And this is not a political opinion on my part either. This is in federal records. Now, I want to be clear about something else. I am obviously a very, very white woman telling this part of the story. And I do want to be careful about that, because this history does not belong to me. It belongs to the people who lived it and had to suffer through it. Black Americans, Indigenous Americans, Latino Americans have been saying this for generations, you guys. They have it documented, written about it, fought to have it acknowledged, and that is what I'm doing. But my job here is not to speak for them. My job is to make sure white Americans like me understand that the system that excluded people of color is the same system that is now failing us. All of us. We are not on opposite sides, you guys. We are being divided on purpose. Ugh. So we would fight each other instead of looking at who drew the new red lines around all of us now. Okay? Because remember, and I will reiterate this, what happens to other families that are not white is eventually going to happen to white people. But y'all don't listen to the POC community at all. Especially black women know what the hell they're talking about. Listen to them. Follow a few of those creators. I'm begging you to do something. Be informed. But now we're going to move on to, the boom itself and the reality of it. So now we know the boom is real and that it wasn't equally available to everyone. Let's talk about the man who named it. James Adams, who was a historian, and I mentioned in my other episode, in 1931 he published a book called Epic of America. And in that book, he wrote about what he called the American dream. He described it as a dream of land in which life should be better, richer, and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. And that sounds simple, but the timing's important, right? Because 1931 was the middle of the Great Depression, as I went over the last episode. Millions of Americans were unemployed. Banks had failed. Families lost everything. Adams was not describing something that existed fully in 1931. Okay? He was describing something worth fighting for, an aspiration, a direction, but not a guarantee. And that distinction does matter enormously here, because somewhere between 1931, right, and the post-war boom, the aspiration became a promise. And somewhere between the post-war boom and today, the promise became a myth used to explain, while struggling people just weren't trying hard enough. Adams himself was very careful. He said the dream was not just about material wealth, okay? It was about the opportunity to develop to your fullest as a human being, regardless of your circumstances at your birth. And that is a very different thing from the version that got sold to each and every one of us, isn't it? Because the version that said, buy a house, buy a car, buy appliances, and you have made it. The consumer version of the dream serves specific interests, you guys. It turned a democratic aspiration into a purchasing decision. And when people couldn't afford to purchase their way to the dream anymore, the message became, you are not working hard enough. Not that the system is not working, but that you are personally failing. That shift from systemic problem to personal failure is one of the most powerful and damaging things that's ever happened to the American working class. And it was not accidental. Okay? So let's take stock of where we are right now in this discussion. So the American dream was named in 1931 during the worst economic collapse in American history. It became genuinely real for roughly 28 years after World War II. Built on specific foundations, strong unions, government investment in working people, right? A manufacturing economy that kept jobs and wages in America. But that boom was never available to everyone equally. Black veterans were systematically denied the same benefits that built white middle-class wealth. Redlining locked entire communities out of home ownership through documented federal policy. The racial wealth gap we live in today was not an accident. It was a choice made by people in power. Okay? And the man who named the dream in the first place was not describing a guarantee. He was describing an aspiration, something worth fighting for, something that required the right conditions to become real. Conditions that were deliberately created for only some Americans and deliberately denied to others. Now, here's the thing that matters most as I close up this episode. Those 28 years of broad prosperity did not end because Americans stopped working hard, you guys. They did not end because immigrants took something from any of us. They did not end because of the welfare or affirmative action or any of the other explanations that get offered to struggling people like you and I. They ended because specific people made specific decisions, documented decisions, with documented names attached to them. And those decisions were made for a reason. The reason is money and power and the ability to keep both concentrated at the top while making sure people like you and I at the bottom stay focused on blaming each other. So we've covered the origin. In the last episode, we covered the boom between both, and now in this episode, we covered who was left out. And we've also covered the man who named something that became one of the most powerful ideas in American history. But we have not yet talked about the moment it started falling apart. The exact moment. The documented decisions and what led to them. The people in the room when it happened. That is episode 3. And I promise you this. By the time this series is done, you are never going to look at your paycheck the same way again. Okay? You will never look at the news the same way again. You will know exactly who to hold responsible. And it's not the immigrant, it's not the person on assistance, and it's definitely not the person who looks different from you. The people who made the decisions. In power, and the top 1%. I will see you in episode 3.